Hello, this is Pat Cahill from Pat Cahill Metalworks, and today I'm going to make a little box out of copper that will hold a matchbook. And, you know, little flair for, for your table if you want to use it to light your candles and stuff like that. They're fun little boxes to make. Problem is that a lot of matchboxes are different in different dimensions. But diamond matches are pretty well, they're standardized. They, you can get them pretty much everywhere. So I'm going to use that as my box to make the box around, or the covering. It's not going to be a true box. Well, I guess it is. The size of the diamond strike-on box matches is 2 1/8 inches long. It's 1.5 inches wide and 0.5 inches on each side. So the first thing I'm going to do is scribe a line that's 2.8 inches. So 2.8 right there, just make a mark with my scribe. We'll make at least 3 marks, and then we'll just use a ruler, and we're cut it out with our saw. One more. Okay. My ruler, line up the marks, and scribe a line. And then we'll saw that out. There might be a lot of glare. Let's bring down the light a little bit. So, let me saw that out. Okay, so it's all sewed out. I had to go in from both sides because you're just never going to make it all the way through. And doing that always leaves a little bit of a... It never matches up perfectly. Well, maybe sometimes, but it's rare. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to file and then sand off the sides so they're nice and smooth and even and perpendicular. So I'll have to go over to my sanding table to do that, but it's just working it on your sandpaper. That's all there is to it. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back, and I also did the sides, so I want to make sure that they're exactly perpendicular. You can see that they are. It's best to do it on here and see it. And I measure, make sure that that's all the right distance, and it is, looks good. So now we want to mark out where we're going to make the bends. So as I said, it's 1.5 inches. It's probably better to use this and mark out 1.5 inch. And I'll do that on the other side too. And that would be our first thing. And then from there, actually you might as well just score it. Make sure everything's lined up nicely. Alright, and that should fit just in there nice and snug. And it does. Perfect. From there we want to make a line from can measure it, but it's a 1/2 inch. And you actually want to be careful about this 1/2 inch. You want to just make sure you go a little bit longer than a 1/2 inch, because it's going to, when you bend it, it's going to be shorter than, if you just did a 1/2 inch, it's actually not going to be a 1/2 inch total. So okay, so I'm going to do, how do I explain this? I'm going to do a 1/2 inch plus 1/8. And on the other side too. Make sure that was correct. Yes. Half inch plus our 1/8. That. Looks good. And then we'll continue with this. Our next sort of line should be the same as this one, which is 1.5 inches. We're going to take up the slack on these, make these things a little bit wider, 1/8 inch wider, but we don't have to do that for the top and the bottom. So we mark off our 1.5 inches, and on the other side, and if it just lines up perfectly, then just make your line. You don't need to score it first. I mean, just score the whole line. You don't need to mark the edge. Okay, so we have that, and our last little piece, we're not going to worry about that at this point. Well, we could, it makes it easier, but I'm going to make it a bit longer than it needs to be, a lot longer. And the only reason I'm even doing this is just to get some of this piece out of the way. We're not going to need that right now. There, so that's going to be our box. One thing we need to decide, and we'll do that later on, with this piece here, we probably want an opening for the strike on the box. So we'll have to work at that, see how we'll design that. Okay, so the next step is to file these out so that they will bend nice and easily. So I'm going to get my files ready and I'll be right back. Okay, so as before, we're going to make a little saw notch where our lines are. We don't want to go through the material. We just want to score it pretty deeply on each side. This will give us an index for when we file down in between each thing so they stay nice and straight from one another. I mean, just a little bit off really translates to a wonky looking box in the end. I've done it. This is actually the hardest part by far. Getting these so that they are perpendicular with the sides is tricky. I don't have an easy way of doing it. So I'm just going over it and bring it more into the center so I have more. More area to work with. I'm not really worried about this one. I'm just gonna cut it out. So actually that's probably the first thing to do. So I'm just gonna saw this out and then I will be back. Okay, so that's sawed off. We'll use that for something. I think what I want to do now is actually take care of this part. I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to mark, when this all folds up, this side needs to be just the width. Oh, I don't need to turn it on, but all right, I'll do that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to tighten it down so it won't move. And then I'm going to score a line here, and that's the thickness of the metal. This is 20 gauge, by the way. And I'll have to take that down, sand it, file it, whatever, so that when this piece all folds around and comes together, this is going to take up, so it's going to be nice and perpendicular each side. Now the next thing I want to do is take care of this part that's going to have a gap in it so that you can strike the matches on the side. So I have this dealio here, and I am going to, I'm just going to eyeball it. What I want is, could I get a little bit fancier? Make it round? No, because the end won't. No, let's keep it. What happened was I'll have it nice and round on this side, but I won't have it round on this side. So it'll look a little bit funky. So let's just stick with boring rectangle. And sure that's about in the center. Again, I could be a little bit more careful. I'm going to be, and find the center so we know that it's 2 1/8. So that's 1 1/16. So that's my center there. Just a little mark. Hopefully you can barely see it, and hopefully I can just see it. Yep. Okay, so remember, this is a lot bigger than it needs to be. It's going to be cut off about here after we soldered it on, but it's good to take care of this step now. Also, this edge has not been straightened, but as long as this is straight with this edge, that's all that matters. So I'm just going to saw this baby out, and again I'll probably cut because I don't think you need to see this. Okay, so that's cut out, and I'll just finish it up by filing it. This is much easier to do now than it would be later on. And sanding it so it's nice and smooth. Okay, so there we have it. So again, as I said, the next step is probably the harder step, and that is scoring a nice straight line all the way across our marks for where we want to put our bends in. So You can do this a lot of ways, and I would prefer if I could use the saw right now, but it is such a long distance that it's tough. I mean, you can take your time and do it like this. Make sure that both ends are aligned, perfectly aligned, and then just come down once. And be careful it doesn't come off its track. Just like that. I mean, it's a slow process, but at least you get a score, and it's easier then to use your, and in this case I'm using a square file because I want our 45-degree angle in the groove. So when I bend it, I have a nice corner. So that's all there is to that, which is a lot. You want to keep staying straight, so take your time, concentrate on it, make sure that you have it so that you're scoring right along the line. And just a little bit off, like I say, will translate to a wonky looking box. So it's very hard for me to hold this and concentrate while I'm filming. You see, there you go. That's not going to affect this at all. Besides, the box is going to be it's going to be turned this way. But you see what I did there? I wasn't paying attention, going slow. And of course, you can also, once I get this more grooved out, I can just go in there with some sandpaper and take that right off, right out. So I'm going to do some of this off camera, bring it back, and show you some progress, and show you again how to just repeat doing it again. Okay, so back again. I ground it out a little bit more. Basically, I wanted to just show you some tips. You know, keep it straight when you're filing the groove. There's no real reason to put a lot of pressure on it. Just, you know, let the file do the work. It's when you put the pressure on it, like I was doing in the very beginning, where you might go off track. I also just took some sanding sponge just to get rid of those marks that were there, and we're actually polish that up a bit more with finer material. So all it is just, you know, going slowly with the file, creating your groove. The groove should be about 2/3 of the way down through the metal. Another trick you can do is use the clamp. I don't know if I've set this up so that it's ergonomically nice for me. I don't believe I did. But, you know, it's nice. You don't have to worry about, can you see that? Yeah, you can barely see the clamp. Let me push this up just a bit here. And, alright, so I'm back again. I wanted to show you the clamp. That makes it easier too. So you don't really have to really hold it really hard, which with one of your hands, which can get tiresome. And then just slowly file your groove. So that's all there is to it. Let me finish up these guys, and I'll get back to you for the bending, and then we'll solder it and we'll move on from there. Okay, we're back and ready to bend it into shape. But one last thing is, remember, we made that little score mark where we wanted to bring that down so that the thickness of the metal itself. So you can do that with a file and sandpaper. It's good to be able to see your line. bring this down and we'll be ready to bend it. I'm going to keep it nice and straight. Long, even strokes across the whole thing. Yeah, that looks good. Looks like I need a little bit more. I'm going to bring it over to my sand table and I'll be right back. Okay, so that's done. We're back. We're ready to bend these. This one's a tough one to bend because it's got such a small little area there on that end, so sort of help it with a pair of pliers. You see how that's warping a little bit on. We'll just go to the other side and slowly bend it up. The other ones will be easy. This one just doesn't have a lot of, I don't know what you'd say, or what the word would be. Doesn't have all that metal to help it. It's different. So, do that as best we can. We might even need to hammer it, which I feel like I'm going to. I want it nice and straight. So, best way to do that, get it on the side and hammer it. Oh, is this thing full? Yeah. And we're doing the same here over here. Okay. Okay, so that side's done. That bend is done. I guess it's also a side. And these ones you can almost just do by your hand. And the last one. Just use a little help here. Okay, there we have it. So now we need to adjust it so that it will, so that it's nice and straight. I'm going to need to fiddle around to get these things in. Make sure it's all aligned properly, like that. Again, we could use binding wire, but I don't want to. So I'm going to let the I'm going to fiddle with it a little bit so that it's all nice and aligned, and then we'll solder it up. We could try it right now. Yeah, that's going to work nicely. Okay, let me get this all ready for soldering and I'll bring it back when I'm ready. Okay, so it's all set up for soldering, and if I can light my torch, which I can't because it's not on. Take 37 coming up later. Okay, I have it all set up for soldering, and my flame nice. Start heating up the whole box. Now I'm going to do solder a little bit differently this time. I put the flux on, and I have this thing to hold it nice and tight down there. We don't need it just yet, but I'll use that when I start to flow the solder. First part is just to get it all nice and heated up. And I'm going to use this wire solder. And when it's hot, I will just drag it along the points I want to solder. A little bit different, but it works. Not there yet. Get this a little bit better. That looks good. You might even want to get in the inside to draw the solder in so you have a nice joint there. Yeah, that's done. And I'll get back to you. Okay, so it's been pickled. I actually gave it a little cleaning with a sponge, sanding sponge. Not necessary, I just wanted to see how it looked. And also I took it out a little bit earlier in the pickle, so it just, didn't look as nice or clean. Probably should have stayed in there longer, but on to the next step. So we cut these tabs off, and you can saw them off, you can nip them off, you can do whatever you want. See, I just nip them off. Get some good nips. And just, there you go. Now we want to bring that down. We'll file it. Got quite a bit of solder on there. Deal with that. So I'm just going to file this down and then sand it down. And then we'll talk about what we can do next. Okay, so let me do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I sanded it all down. And I just finished it off again with the sanding sponge. Fine grit. Just to give it a little bit of surface texture. Make it a little matte. Well, that's it. Now, let's try our box. Should fit in there nicely. It does. And then we can take our match out and strike it. So a little cute little easy little box to make for matches. And there's a lot more you can do now. Of course, you could add a stone to the top of it. Very easy. You've seen me do that before. I don't know if I have a stone here. How about this guy? You get the idea of how that would look. Be nice. Make it much more fancy. There's a lot of other things one can do with it. You could texture the outside. The one issue is you really couldn't hammer it unless you had some sort of form underneath of it that would take the blows, because this would just collapse. The other thing is that you could put a piece on the end so that it's only one side slides in. That's good, but it's when I did that for one, it was very hard to get the stupid box out, because you know, you have to sort of go like this. It's not so bad. It depends on how. This one's just perfect, actually. There we go. So there you go. A case for Matchbox out of copper. I usually make it out of sterling silver, but I didn't have the sterling silver to do it today, so I did it with copper. Copper's nice. It will tarnish over time, quite quickly as a matter of fact, but you might end up with a lovely patina. So thank you for watching, and I hope I get to see you again sometime. Goodbye.